This is All Grit.
Hosted by Animesh and Tanya.
Today on the podcast, we have an exciting chat with Piyush Sharma. He did his MBA from IMT Ghaziabad, post which he went on to work in Cadence Design Systems and is currently the Director of Sales at an innovative supply chain and logistics startup, Locus. He talks about the significance of life experiences and networking while stressing on the importance of having the right processes and the required hustle in a profile like sales in any organization.
Hi Piyush, welcome to the podcast. Really looking forward to this conversation. This is the first time that we've had somebody from sales, so I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for having me here. Glad to be talking to you guys.
Thank you for taking out the time, Piyush, from Bangalore.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good Sunday to be talking to you. Yeah.
We can hear the birds.
yeah. Yeah. I hope it's not too distracting for the viewers, but yeah.
No, that's all right. We would like to start from the very beginning of your career. You did your MBA from IMT Ghaziabad.
Right.
So, what prompted you to go for an MBA, and how has the course helped you in your career?
Okay. So going a step back, so I did my engineering in electronics from IP University in Delhi, which is a renowned university in Delhi, but definitely not tier one. And I knew pretty early on that most of us are going to be doing programming for an IT services firm, regardless of the branch that we were in. Nothing against programming. I really like the logical aspect of programming and the power that it gives to the users and the people. But I wasn't big on a desk job ever, sitting behind a desk, looking at the screen the entire day, which is quite ironic now in the lockdown. This is what we've been doing for months now. But so I had started preparing for an MBA right at the end of my second year. Now, come placement season, as it always happens, I got placed in one of these large IT services providers. Again, nothing against them. But the fact was that the topper from my batch and the guy who had four backs, they were also in the same profile, same salary bracket, same company. So there's nothing that you can't stand out from the crowd. You're part of the crowd, and both of them ended up joining. I didn't. It was a tough decision because all of my friends were going and it would have been a comfort zone, but I was certain to get that kickstart in my career. Higher studies was the better option. That was the reason I eventually went for an MBA. Now, in terms of how it has helped me, it is almost to the point of a cliche now, that, and I can't stress on this more. The real value of an MBA lies in networking and the life experiences it gives you. Being around people who think differently than you, who come from different backgrounds, different job profiles, those late nighters, discussions on group assignments, those intergroup dynamics, almost like a mini big boss in a campus. So in that way, it has helped me tons in terms of the life experience, and also it has helped me get the opportunities, the foot in the door. After you get a foot in the door, it's all you, of course, but that foot in the door is extremely valuable. And that is where an MBA is extremely key. Even now you see these colleges going for an online MBA now. It is a big thing in startup now, because MBA will always be critical. It will always get you the opportunities, and people value the life experience and the networking you do while you're doing an MBA.
Right. One of the things that I really want to ask you is that you, like you said, you went for your MBA fresh out of your college. So now, when you look back at that experience, do you identify any major gaps in pursuing a management degree without prior work experience?
What I would say is you should never do an MBA for the sake of it, which is pretty much how it's been happening in India. The society has guided that decision for a long time. After BTech, higher studies, karna hai, MTech, MBA, if you don't want to work. So society should not be guiding that decision in hindsight. Let me put it this way: your M will be much more valuable to you and for the society if you know what corporate life already is and what it entails. If you're a fresher, it will be a longer learning curve for you. That's one of the differences. But that being said, once you have the degree, then it's the work that you do that speaks for you. I have interviewed people who are from one of the top MBA colleges in India, some of the top MBA colleges in India. And believe me, no one is going to ask you, what did you study in your supply chain course in your MBA? Or what did you learn from that assignment? People are going to value the life experience, and that gets you the foot in the door that I was speaking to you about. So if you have experience going into an MBA, it is the most ideal thing, and everyone should target for that. If not, then make sure that you know that you will have to work double hard to ensure that people will value what you do after an MBA or what you speak during your interview. Everyone should know they have to put double efforts if they are a fresher. They have to do more networking. They have to understand very quickly how these group discussions, how these assignments will impact their life after an MBA. What is the real meaning of, creating so many different groups for assignments? Why is that intergroup dynamics important? What is the importance of networking? A guy who has gone through a corporate life already knows that intuitively. A fresher has to work double hard, and anyone who's in fresher going into an MBA right now, you have to be aware of that. Otherwise, it'll be an even longer learning curve for you.
That is what we are experiencing as well while we do our MBA, because we have some experience. So it becomes a little easier to grasp concepts and apply to it as to what we used to practice before coming here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
And
so
working in a group,
yes, that's
just
critically
want
that
to
is critical.
working in a group adds a lot of value. So it's not about, um, and I'm pretty sure you guys might be doing this right now, pretty much what we did. When you get an assignment, you must be dividing work. Okay, slide 1 to 3, this guy will do. Slide 3 to 5, this guy will do. You guys have to pick people from different backgrounds, get into a room, together what everyone thinks about it, discuss the strengths that each of you bring to the table, and that's when you divide the work. And not key, okay, A part will be done by this guy, B part will be done by this guy. Because even intuitively you can figure out that's where the value is. And even after an MBA, that's what people will value, and not that you did XYZ part of an assignment.
I wanted to discuss your life. The moment you came out of your MBA, you joined Cadence in tech sales, right? So you joined your MBA
Mhm.
as well when you were a fresher, and you must have done a lot of prospecting
Yeah.
as to what job profile do you want and where do you want to go. So was tech sales or sales always in your list?
Um, I was very clear about one thing. I wanted to interact with people. And that's why marketing and sales caught my eye initially. Eventually, I learned that the nuances of B2B sales, B2B tech sales, are more aligned to my style. They suit my style more than B2C. B2B is more relationship driven, strategic, value based, and B2C is more about personal gratification. And branding plays a huge role in B2C, these e-commerce sales and things like that. So I realized that B2B tech sales has a bigger nuance, which is more aligned to my skill sets. So that's when I made that decision, and it has only gotten strongly validated since. Eventually, you have to figure out during an MBA, before an MBA, after an MBA, what is it that you want to do, and then take risks towards that. And then eventually, those risks will have higher rewards.
Mhm.
But in hindsight, nothing is a bad decision. Everything is a learning. So, yeah.
Since Cadence was your first job and your first profile was sales, and it is
Mhm.
extremely rigorous to be there, right? You have to
Right.
face rejections, you have to follow discipline. So, were there any challenges which you faced as like somebody who has never been exposed to that world, suddenly exposed to so much?
Towards that, huge credits to my manager in Cadence, who was the sales director of India, Mr. Jay Shankar. He saw it in me and he wanted to groom me, and he decided to take a punt on me. So, by the way, Cadence for everyone is more than a $1.5 billion revenue, not valuation, revenue company. It is more than a 20-year-old company, and it has very strong and solid sales fundamentals. And it is one of those companies that is touching our lives right now, but we might not have ever heard of it. It is very niche. It's in the electronic design automation industry, and it creates software products to automate the VLSI and chip design flow. So your Qualcomm Snapdragon processors, your MacBooks, your washing machines, TVs, They have integrated circuits with billions of transistors, and they need a software product to automate that design process. That is what Cadence built. So it is essentially touching your life, but as I said, very niche, but strong product companies, solid sales fundamentals, and being in Cadence with one of the strongest tech sales teams in the industry was a blessing. And to attend sales calls with these experienced sales guys, watching them interact with customers, how were they handling objections, how were they doing negotiations, right at the beginning of my career, sort of set me up. And that was a huge takeaway. Talking about challenges, even in sales, even if you're a fresher, you have to learn and adapt fast, or the opportunity has passed. So, since I was a fresher early into my career, in my first year, I wasn't getting the bigger portfolio accounts to handle, the larger sums, the bigger stakeholders, because I was quite literally the youngest. Everyone else was 7 to 10 years experienced in the team. Now at that point of time, I didn't know what to do exactly. Maybe it was the lack of work experience before or what. But I figured I had to take certain risks. So I took up Cadence University program, which is selling the VLSI software suite to universities in the electronics field. And everyone in electronics and communication has used Cadence's products, OrCAD or PCB design software. So that was a huge market. I took up that risk during my first year. And post that, when people see the hunger and aggressiveness in you, and that you are willing to do bigger things, and you're aligned with the goals of the company, that's when things start working out for you. And that's exactly what happened. I ended up developing great customer relationships over the 3 years. Was part of a company with a great culture. Cadence is known to have a great culture. It features in great places to work list consistently. And that just set me up career wise. And I was more sure of what I wanted to do in my career post that.
Right, and like you said, I mean, after a great stint at Cadence for about three plus years, you took a bold decision of shifting to a then small and relatively unknown company, a startup, Locus. So, what were you looking for when you decided to make this jump?
Okay, so I was sure about a couple of things. I wanted to make a sale and see it impact the top line of the company. That was something that I was yearning for, because I was still not getting those $1 million accounts, and for a company like Cadence, even those hardly impact the top line. The bigger region was US, not India. But I wanted to make a sale and see its impact on the top line. I was around people who were working in startups. I wanted to work in a culture of hustle, and with like-minded people of the same age, same mindset. The comfortables can come later in your career. At 28, or rather 25 to 40, is the period of peak productivity in your career. That is the period in which you should do everything you can in terms of hustling, and then you can take up the comfortable jobs. So when I was sharing these feelings with a friend in one of our house parties, that's when he mentioned that he has a friend who has this upcoming startup called Locus, who's going to raise Series A, and he connected me with him because it, had all the check boxes, and I took up that opportunity. And yeah, it's been more than 4 years now. I was the first sales guy there after our chief business officer, who was also one of the seed investors. Have seen the company grow from 10 to now more than 200, from a revenue of 50K to more than 5 million now. So it's been a great journey in that way. And yeah, only going stronger now, more than 4 years, but still.
I'm sure. And you spoke about culture a bit, and we in the MBA are reading about the company culture quite a lot. It comes up time and time again during our readings. So, and I'm sure that the culture of Cadence was far different from the culture at Locus. So, how did you cope with that change? Did you face any challenges? How was that journey like?
So it was definitely a culture change. Moving from a tech park in a great locality to a 5 BHK house, working, sitting on sofas, dining tables. But in all honesty, it was only a culture change. It was not a culture shock, because it was like being back at the campus. We often say that we are not a family, we are a sports team. So all of us bring our A game to the table. And the thing about working in a startup is the feeling of accountability and ownership. You own something. So about the point of being back in campus, again, those late nighters working together, and people are working in their, casual clothes, and that entire thing of rigid structures and policies has gone away. Working towards mini projects, scaling up the projects and startup, first in India, then internationally. It just felt right. The culture felt right, to be very honest. And kudos to the CEO Nishit and the CTO Geet. They did a they did lots of hard work to hire the right people, right talent, to ensure that the culture doesn't get diluted even when we are scaling up. And I think the biggest change was the sudden flexibility that I had. I was not part of a rigid structure or process right now. I sort of owned the process along with my team, and we created processes. And yeah, that was the biggest change. So all in all, it was a culture change, but it felt right. It felt more right. It was never a culture shock.
Another great example of a similar culture is Netflix, what we have studied, where they say that we are a sports team, we are not a family. So, great workplace is great colleagues.
Yeah.
Another thing which I wanted to ask you, like you said, locals grew exponentially, and when a company grows exponentially, the demand on salespeople increases, right? The demand, the what is needed
Mhm.
of you. So, did you face any challenges? Because I'm sure you would have in IMT Ghaziabad, you would have imagined a linear progression of your career, right? But this was an
Right.
explosion suddenly. So, what did you do over there?
Lots of things changed. So I remember on my second day, we used to have a team sprint in which everyone gets together, shares their updates. And at that point of time, of course, we were in a house setup. And all of us sat around the dining table, all 10, 12 of us, including the data science team, the engineering front and back end guys, the sales team, the customer success team. And all of us were sharing our updates. The culture was that straight. I mean, with a smaller team, it was that straightforward sharing updates then. So when we scaled up with more customers, we of course needed more team members, and lots of things changed. And the first thing to change was, of course, the internal changes. There were structures and processes that were brought into place. Uh, Forget everyone having a sprint together. Like front end engineering is a different sprint, customer success is a different sprint, sales is a different discussion, and then trying to find a common platform in which everyone can see everyone's updates. So lots of internal changes in terms of structures and processes happened. With respect to hiring the right talent, that was one of the major issues and major things to keep in mind, because it is very important that when you scale up, the culture doesn't get diluted. So we had to spend that extra time, that if we are going from 10 to 50 to 100 to 200, we are still hiring the right talent so that the culture is intact and they're aligned with the culture. They're aligned with the company's goals. They are still bringing their A game. They are still, for innovation. Uh, and the third key thing that usually changes is the product itself. So they were, of course, product challenges which scale automatically brings up. Uh, Things like, can we handle a larger scale? We want to sell to enterprises. Do we have the right security clearances in place? Are we GDPR compliant? Do we have ISO certification? Um, uh, ABC clients wants this feature request, XYZ wants B feature request. How do we prioritize? How do we deploy it so that it impacts most clients? So with scale comes different asks, different types of feature requests, and the product has to pick a path that it has to take in terms of its product vision and align everyone accordingly. So the third challenge that came up with scale was the product challenges. From a sales point of view, you now have to work with different teams. Previously also you were working with different teams, but the head of data science used to sit 2 seats away from me, so I could just tap him and ask him ki, hey, this is the problem statement, what do you think, how can we model this? With structures and scale and structures are not a bad thing. Structures and processes are highly important. But that level of interaction goes away, and that is perfectly fine. That is very organic and natural as well. That, we brought up companies and softwares and processes like Jira, in which we have to raise a formal request. and someone from engineering will look at it, prioritize it, bring it up in their sprint, and then see when it can be deployed. So while I could just reach out to my CTO or head of data science, take them to a room and discuss what are the problem statements, that part will automatically change with scale. And yeah, that's what processes are meant to be, to make everything smoother. Otherwise, 20 sales guys reaching out to them the entire day, when will they do their work? So that is one thing that changes.
And can you give us a contrast of what the processes at Locus are right now and what the processes were in Cadence?
Okay. So the thing about processes is that people often assume that startups create and break their own rules, and there's a lack of processes. But processes are extremely important, and we created the right set of processes. Also, oftentimes people confuse processes and policies.
Mhm.
Processes are needed, policies are not. Like you have to wear a certain thing, you have to be a certain way. Those are policies. Those are not important. Processes are intended to make your life smoother and better and help you do your work more easily. Policies are supposed to restrict you. So in a startup, especially, processes are key, policies are not. And that part was absolutely great about Locus. Now, as the client base increased, our processes had to change and become more robust. What was a company-wide process had to be split into an engineering process, a sales process, customer success process. We were working with different teams, as I told you, who themselves had different processes and structures. So in that way, we are slowly evolving to where how an MNC functions. But as a company culture, we will never have these policies which restrict people from doing certain things. Yeah.
Right. And, going back to one of the things that you said, the reason why you decided to go to Locus is that you wanted to see the contribution that you make towards the company. You wanted to see tangibly in front of you. And I think that's one of the things which is great about sales, right? Because and that makes it very attractive as well, that you're able to see tangible results in front of your eyes. And
Right.
another thing that makes, I think, sales a very attractive avenue for young graduates is the incentives that come along with it. But personally, I've always been in two minds about the whole concept because, on the one hand, these incentives can drive people to kind of put in more effort, to work harder, and to do better. But on the other hand, it can also create a very strong competitive environment around you where it ends up becoming all about the incentives beating the growth, the purpose of growth, which was meant to be. So I just want to
Right.
understand your thoughts about that.
Um, in both of my companies, incentives have always been a positive driving force. I think what it comes down to is you have to align the salesperson and the incentive plan to the vision of the company. You are chasing a target for incentives, right? Everyone is chasing a target for incentives. But why are we incentivizing? Why is it important that you meet your target? How is the company growing with your contribution? Why should you be invested in other people also meeting their targets? All of these have to be handled. A good incentive plan is that's my core belief and my experience as well. A good incentive plan will also result in better teamwork. Blindly chasing targets for incentives and not having a vision on what it is actually contributing to should not be encouraged. It happens in certain companies, should not be encouraged. Someone trying to bring others down to achieve his target, that's a strict no-no. Now, the second point about it bringing about competition, healthy competition is always good. As I said, no one should be trying to bring each other down. They should all be hoping that everyone is successful so that the company grows. The more the company grows, my money grows because my incentives grow. If I have a share of the pie, maybe in terms of ESOPs, I would want everyone in the sales team to overachieve on their targets because now my vision of sales targets is aligned with the company's target. My company has to do, let's say, 10 million ARR in 2021. My target is, let's say, 1 million. Now I know why my target is 1 million. Why am I being incentivized to do that? Because if my company meets 10 million, it maybe raises the next round of funding. My incentives get higher. My share of the pie in terms of ESOPs gets higher. What I've realized from your statement, Tanya, is it comes back to the culture you have built and the people that you have hired. if you have built the wrong culture, if you have hired the wrong people, and I can take some names in terms of companies, but you must be seeing on LinkedIn, it's there. So if you have built the wrong sales culture and you're incentivizing people and people are just chasing targets blindly, all of those issues that you were trying to point towards will come, definitely. Hire the right people, align them with the company's vision, and bring align them to the company's culture as well.
So, tech sales and sales can be, it is usually solving problems, right? You're just solving problems which are there with your client. And it can be to a
Right.
point where you use plethora of solutions, you become a consultant of sorts, that you have this problem, I have this solution, right? So,
Right.
what actionable advice will you give to people who are aiming to go into sales and specifically tech sales?
Right. So the world has progressed a lot in terms of solution selling. That you have this problem, I have this solution. In fact, after solution selling came the concept of challenger sale. But maybe we should do a different session on how to sell in tech sales. But just to give a brief thing on how it has changed, the the person that you're selling to values you more when you challenge his perceptions of how he's running his business, and that is what is called as the challenger sales model. It is sort of the next thing to solution selling. It is no longer, because there are thousands of solutions in the market. As you rightly said, there are thousands of use cases, and a person who's in the position of acquiring or procuring a vendor, he will have hundreds of solutions companies pitching to him the same thing, that you have this problem, we have this solution that can add value. That thing has passed, because the market is that huge now. Now what that person will really value and how you will stand out amongst the crowd of 100 is when you tell him that, hey, this is how you're running your business. Firstly, these are the industry practices that I've seen. I feel that ABC are very relevant for you. You should be looking at that because the industry leaders are looking at that. So you are challenging him, and then you're telling him that my solutions can help you achieve some of these in this way. Maybe do a proof of concept, maybe do a pilot. Of course, prove the value to him. That is very important. But you will stand out to him. Now, if tech sales interests any one of you who's listening, or both of you, then firstly, a great choice. It is a very rewarding career. Selling technology that adds value to your customers' lives and customers' business is itself very rewarding. And what I would advise for you if you want to get into this field is, you should actively be in the know-how of what innovations are happening in which industry, what is happening in FMCG, what is happening in retail. The great thing about Locus is that it works across industries. We are selling to FMCG logistics as well, retail as well, e-commerce as well, services like Urban Clap type of companies as well. And I essentially did a mini MBA after I left my MBA. When I joined Locus, I had read about supply chains, but when I went to this company, I went to Coca-Cola's bottling plant in Wadi. I saw the entire process, how it's happening. And then it wasn't a case study for me anymore. I saw it in action. So tech sales, selling to a certain industry, you get to learn about that industry really deep. And you get to learn about how technology is impacting that industry, which, if that industry is traditional, is not aware right now. They've been doing things a traditional way. You're bringing some disruption. You'll of course have to prove that it's a disruption, positive disruption, and that just gives you a great platform to talk to the customer and learn from him, and go to his warehouse, go to his operations, learn from how things are happening, and then prepare a solution for him. And then he will also give you lots of value. So definitely, what innovations are happening in what industry, who's raising funding, because there are plenty of solutions. How will you ever figure out which are the ones that stand out? So keep looking at who raised seed funding, who raised series A, who's going towards series B. If someone has raised series A, then they've essentially found a product market fit. If someone is looking at raising series B, then they are actively selling, they have already established a product market fit, they have plenty of customers, and they're going all out in terms of expansion. So keep looking at those companies that are raising funding. Essentially, the technology innovation is largely brought about by startups now, not that much by enterprises. And that's why I went to the point of funding. What is their USP? What are they selling? What is their product? So be in the know-how of all of these things, and you will figure out that, wow, I mean, this startup is doing great. And I'm of course talking a lot about startups because that is one of my bigger advice through this platform. Start with the innovative startup with a great business model, of course. Of course, do your own checks. Who are their investors? What is their founder's background? If you are not founding the company yourself, that is even greater. Uh, People often say, and I believe that I attest to that, that an year in a startup is equal to 3 years in an enterprise. And if you have founded that startup, an year in a startup is actually equal to more than 5 years in an enterprise, because it teaches you so many things very quickly. It teaches you to be more accountable, and it's an opportunity that everyone should target. And yeah, actively people should be going for that.
Right. And one of the obvious things from the way that you're talking is your passion for the field is just very infectious, and all of us, I think, can hear it from the way you're talking. So thank you for that great advice. I think I completely agree with you that it is really important to kind of hustle in the first few years of your career, because that helps you grow a lot, that helps you learn a lot. Now we've come to the heart of the piece where I'm going to ask you about the hardest decision that you've ever had to make and what did you learn from it?
um, Actually, two hard decisions, and we touched upon both of them. One was not following my friends into a job that I was not ready for, honestly. But that would have been a comfort zone. That was, I remember at that point of time, it was a huge internal debate. Um, Parents would have backed whatever I would have chosen because both of prospects were good. But it was a huge internal debate where my comfort zone was going away, and I was essentially changing my entire network of people and going to another place. And no one really was going with me, and that huge backing of friends was going away. Everyone was joining that company. That was a tough decision. And then joining an early stage startup from a comfortable role in an MNC was at that point really tough. What made it easy was talking to people about the startup, talking to the investors in the interview, talking to the founders, learning from them what is their vision. But in both cases, I've learned that you've got to make things happen. As I said, in hindsight, there are no bad decisions, there are only learnings. But that is something you learn in hindsight. At that point of time, it seems like a risk to you. And if you do take that risk, definitely the rewards will be higher. So I would encourage everyone to take those risks. If they feel that this is what they want to do, but it is risky, take that risk. And when should you take that risk? When you're early in your career. You don't want to wait to be 40 and then taking large risks. So change things around, get out of your comfort zone, hustle, take risks when you're early into your career. And no matter how the experience ends up, I'm very sure you would have gained a lot in your career. So these two hard decisions taught me a lot, and definitely lots to learn from that.
So it has been great talking to you, Piyush. We got to know a lot about a fresher basically joining an MBA college and getting out of an MBA college, joining a MNC, and then joining a startup which completely blew up. We got to know a lot about what in MBA matters, your experience and networking, and at the same time, how policies are different from processes, and how we hate policies but not processes. Processes are very critical to the whole thing, and at the same time, how a good culture can foster your sales force, and a bad culture can completely reverse the growth of the company. With that being said,
Mhm.
this is the last question of the podcast. You have 2 minutes. The stage is yours. If you can tell us something interesting which you have been doing professionally or personally in this lockdown.
Okay. Um, so I had already gotten a dog. He's a 2-year-old beagle now. And yeah, mostly the life around lockdown has been centered around him, giving him attention. And but let me link it back to some of the previous statements that I made. So it again links. So the decision to take a dog is a big decision. And you can't really take a dog if you are working and your wife is working, and who'll take care of him. And that's where Locus does not have policies to restrict you from doing things in your personal life. They actually created a separate space, a pen for dogs. and it became a pet friendly office, and we already have a Rottweiler and of course my beagle there, and other people can bring their dogs. And in between work, if you want to take a break, just go up, play with the dogs, feed them. So I never had to worry about taking a dog, and that's the kind of confidence and a strong positive culture brings in you. And as I said, now his separation anxiety has gone through the roof because I've been available for him throughout the time. And I think he also wants to go to the office very soon. But yeah, the entire lockdown has been about Zoom meetings and my puppy, and of course my wife. I have to include her. Yeah.